From the ages of around 6 to 11, my family and I lived in a very rough neighborhood. One night it was just my mom, myself, and my 2 siblings at home. My dad used to drive truck for a living, which obviously meant that he was away an awful lot, meaning a lot of the time it was just our mom taking care of us. That night at around midnight, someone started ringing our apartment's buzzer. My mom woke up and went to the little intercom to ask who it was, and no one answered. She thought that maybe it was some kids playing ding-dong ditch or something juvenile like that, so instead of being scared, she was just annoyed as she went back to bed. But then about 30 minutes later, someone starts buzzing for a second time. Mom gets up again and peers through the side window to see if she can spot anyone out there, but she can't see a single living soul, and that's when she started to freak out. She goes back to the room and grabs my dad's gun, and then sits in the living room in the dark just waiting for someone to try and break in. After God knows how long, there was another buzz. This time, Mom said she very calmly explained that if they carried on harassing us, she was going to call the cops, and if they tried to break in, she would shoot them. Again, there was no response, so she went back to the window to see if she could spot anyone, and that time, she did. She said that there were 3 guys out there, faces covered, all looking up at the window, all looking right at her. Mom said she rushed to call the cops, all the while me and my 2 siblings were asleep in our bedroom. No one tried to break in right away, but my mom had to wait for an hour for the cops to finally show up, and when they did, they buzzed our buzzer, causing her to freak out one more time, thinking that the masked men were outside again. Thankfully, it was the cops, and she invited them up to do a quick look and around the outside of the apartment building to make sure no one was hanging around. After their search, they tell my mom that they had found a piece of barbed wire about 4 feet long next to the front door and asked if it belonged to my mom. She said that it wasn't hers and asked why. The cop then told her that there was a chance that it belonged to whoever was knocking at the door. Mom asked if they thought the people were planning on using it, and although they assured her that there was no way of knowing that, she's convinced to this day that they were planning on torturing us. However, what the cops did confirm is that she was very smart not to open the door to see who was there, otherwise it could have cost her life. They also said that they'd patrol the neighborhood until morning and do a thorough investigation once there was daylight. And later on that morning, once my siblings and I were at school, they called back to talk to her about something. They said that when they were searching around the house, they found footprints leading around to the back of the home, leading up to my bedroom window. You see, our apartment was on the 2nd floor, so scarily accessible to anyone with a fairly long ladder. They also found nicks in the window sill where the person, or persons, were trying to pry open the window to break in, but failed. My mom always suspected that one of our neighbors had been involved, because he would always stare very creepily at my mom whenever they crossed paths. He also knew when my dad wasn't home, since he knows what vehicle he drives. Mom said that was the final straw of wanting to get the hell out of that place, and as soon as my dad came home, she gave him a very strong ultimatum: find us someplace else to live, or she was leaving him and taking us kids with her. And so within 6 months we were living somewhere else, and I celebrated my 12th birthday someplace where she actually felt safe, and not in a neighborhood where she felt like she needed to sleep with one eye open.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
No, I want to go hiking, Derek insisted. Just shut up and pack your swimsuits, Gabriella responded in annoyance. But Mom, we will be going there by bus. Isn't it better to go on a hiking trip this year? He said while trying to convince her. You know why we do this every year, right? She looked at him and asked while hoping he would stop being unreasonable. Why should we do this? It's the dad who killed her, Derek mumbled in a frustrated tone, which Gabriella and me both heard. Derek, if you cannot go with us, then you won't go anywhere. Go to your room right now, she scolded while smacking him on his back, and he stomped upstairs in response. Don't be harsh on him, honey. I think I'll go there by myself this year, I said with a defeated tone who was watching the entire time. No, you know we'll be together to support you, no matter what, right? She came closer and wrapped her arms around my neck while saying this. I nodded. Around 8 years ago, I used to live in an old house that my grandma left for me near the beach. The house was pretty old, and it needed regular maintenance, so I was doing just that. One day, I woke up in the middle of the night and I could not sleep after that, so I decided to take a walk and get some fresh air. I drank some water, grabbed my jacket, and went outside the house. As I was walking, I went near the beach. That was when I noticed a girl wearing a white dress was sitting on the opposite side of the beach. I could not see her face. All I could notice was her long black hair, along with the white dress that she was wearing. Water was washing off her feet and half of her body seemed wet. I thought, she may be depressed or something, and that must be the reason for her being here at this hour. So I did not think much of it at the time and went back to walking for a few minutes. The next day, I called my fiancée Gabriella and talked with her for hours. Gabriella and I were dating for almost 5 years now, and I had recently proposed to her. She was also pregnant with my child at the time, and I was in love with her more than ever. After talking to her for about an hour or so, I got ready for work and headed out. As I was passing through the beach, the scene from last night flashed through my mind. The same night I was drinking alone around midnight when I saw from the entrance that the same girl walked toward the same spot that she was sitting last night when she sat there. Maybe she just recently went through a breakup or something. That's what I thought then. As I was drinking, I stared at her, who was just sitting still, staring at the ocean for hours. But I soon got tired and started feeling sleepy, so I went to my bed. I continued my routine as always, and after waking up, I first texted Gabrielle good morning, took a shower after that, and got ready for work. I went down to the kitchen while dialing her number and started making eggs. "Morning, honey. What are you up to?" she said as soon as she answered the phone. "Missing my love in my arms," I said playfully, and she chuckled in response. After that, I talked to her while making and then eating breakfast. I told her about the girl in the white dress that I kept seeing for the last 2 days. "Be careful. She might be a lost spirit or something," she said in a serious tone, which made me pause for a few seconds, but then she burst into laughter. "You scared me," I said, taking a deep sigh of relief. "Don't worry, maybe she's going through something. Just don't pay much attention. And if you're curious, just ask her if anything is troubling the girl," she said in a chill tone. "No thanks, I don't want to approach a possible ghost," I said, and we both started to laugh. After that, I kept noticing for a few days her sitting there and staring at the ocean while the waves wash off at her feet, making her half-body wet in the process. From her appearance, she seemed in her early 20s, but I could never see her face. One day when I was talking to my fiancée, she asked, "It's been almost a month, is she still doing that?" I told her that she was, so she said that maybe the girl needed help and suggested I offer help. I was thinking the same for the past couple of days, so I agreed. Later that night when I saw the girl sitting there, I walked closer to her and stood behind her. I called out for her, but she did not respond. I walked a bit more closely and asked if everything was okay. She turned her head toward me. Her lips looked chapped and there were huge dark circles under her eyes. It made me scared for a few seconds. Then I shook my head and asked again if she needed any help. She kept staring at me without saying anything. I thought it was a waste of time and turned to leave. That was when someone grabbed my legs all of a sudden and started pulling me into the water. I turned and saw that it was her. She had a completely blank expression on her face, as if she did not have any emotion at all, which scared me even more. At this point, I was sure that this was no human, but a ghost, because as she grabbed my legs, I could feel her long nails piercing into my skin. I kicked with all my might and tried to run, but she again grabbed me into the water. But I was so terrified that as a protective response, I strangled her and left her in the water. After that, I ran, panting, in my house and called Gabriella to tell her everything that happened. She asked me to calm down, saying if it's really a ghost, I did not kill an actual person. The next day, I saw many people and police officers gathered around near the beach. As I was panicking, someone rang the doorbell. I opened it hesitantly and saw that it was Gabriella at the door. I started crying, and she just held me while telling me that everything would be okay. I went ahead and confessed everything to the police officers about what happened that night. They told me that the girl's name was Sarah, and the reason she may have done that was that she had a mental condition along with severe trauma for men. Sarah was harassed and physically abused by her uncle and his sons from a very young age until she was rescued by a women's organization. But as a result, she developed a mental condition. I was sentenced to jail, but they released me early since what I did was due to self-defense. I was released from prison 2 years ago, and ever since then, I went to the beach every year to put flowers on the grave of the person I killed. How about we go hiking next week? I entered Derek's room and said. His face lit up, but then suddenly he looked at me with an apologetic reaction. Sorry, Dad, for saying rude things earlier. I smiled and hugged him. After that, we took our stuff and headed out. I kissed her while looking at her with extreme love in my eyes. As we were heading to the beach, I was thinking that I was thankful to Gabriella for waiting for me and always standing beside me.
I come from a South Asian country where it's kind of unsafe for a girl to go out on solo adventures. That being said, there are some states which are relatively safe. 2019 had been a rough year for me, but by October I'd started feeling better and decided to take a solo trip for my birthday. I spoke to some friends and decided to head to the small village down south. My brother helped convince my overprotective mother as he'd already been there. But to put her mind at ease, I decided to grab some pepper spray. Unfortunately, we couldn't find one, so I kept a bottle of deodorant and a knife handy. I decided to stay there for 5 days and booked a room at a guest house for only 2 days, thinking I would check out this guest house that my friend had suggested and hopefully spend the remainder of my stay there. To tell you a little more about this village, it's a hippie paradise if you know what I mean. Everyone is extremely friendly and warm, and they have tourists coming from all over the globe. Once I got to the run, I was a little paranoid because it seemed a little dingy. Forget about security systems, the latch on the door was barely functional. The first night was a bit unsettling, but nothing happened. The next day was my birthday, so I rented a bike and went out exploring the village. Sometime after lunch, I decided to check out the guest house that my friend had recommended, which was a little secluded, but extremely peaceful. As I reached there, I was greeted by the owner who showed me around this place. Had big cuts on one side and a small row of rooms on the opposite side. I decided to take the latter, as it was much cheaper, and I didn't plan on being in the room much anyway. We exchanged numbers and I told him I'd move in the next day. The next day, I got there and had lunch with the owner, and he told me about the history of the place and a bit about himself. I realized that he wasn't around when my friend had been there. I was trying to read him, see if I was getting creepy vibes from him, since I was going to be spending 2 nights there, but I didn't see any red flags in particular. After lunch, I went to a restaurant that was right behind the guest house. I met some of the locals whom I was already acquainted with. Along with them, there were two new guys, one of whom was from the city. The three of us instantly clicked and started hanging out. Once it got dark, we came back to my guest house to chill. When the older told us that he was planning a bonfire with some of his guests/friends who were sitting at another table, an hour passed, we played cards, and the guys didn't seem like they were much in the mood for a bonfire and left shortly after. So the owner had already set things up. We decided to spend some time by the fire with them. We were all sitting and chatting until midnight, when the other two boys decided to take off as they weren't staying there. I told the owner that I headed back to my room too. He tried to convince me to stay out a bit longer, but I didn't want to be alone with him. My room door had 4 to 5 locks, but only 2 of them worked, so I locked them and realized that the windows facing each other did not have any panes, and the curtains were made of scraps of cloth, which meant that anyone could peek inside to see everything. So I went to the bathroom to change and clean up. As soon as I stepped out and started rummaging through my bag, I heard someone whisper my name twice. My heart skipped a beat and I froze for a few seconds. I decided to ignore it and quickly turned out all the lights. Before going to bed, I decided to keep the bin right in front of the door in case someone tried to open it. At least that would make noise. I took out my deodorant and knife and kept it right next to me on the pillow before laying in bed. I kept looking at both of the windows on the side to see if anyone was out there. About an hour and a half later, the metallic door started rattling violently, as if someone was trying to force it open. Instantly, I stood up and got a hold of the knife and deodorant. My mouth went dry and my heart started beating fast. I didn't know if I should scream because I only knew of one other girl who was staying in the opposite heart. After what felt like forever, the door stopped shaking and I collapsed onto the bed. I checked the windows to see if anyone was walking by, but no one did. I tried to think of what it could have been. Maybe it was the wind, but the curtains hadn't moved from one bit. It had to have been a person. I don't know when, but I passed out soon after. I wake up around 6 a.m. to see that it was almost bright outside. I closed my eyes and tried to go back to sleep. But when it started happening again, frantically, I shot up in bed, ready to attack. But once again, it stopped after a few minutes. I didn't even understand what was happening. Was it even real? I went closer to the door and got to look at the bin that I had kept by the door that had moved away from its original position. Yes, something had definitely happened. Not knowing what to do, I opted to go back to sleep. When I got out of the room later, I tried to read the owner's face, but it was just as hard to read as the day before. What worried me the most was that I had to spend another night in that room. I decided to not let that thought spoil the day, and went out with the 2 friends I'd made for a track, and then watched the sunset from the hilltop where all the locals gathered to play music in the evenings, including the owner. My new friends and I were somewhere else after that, and at around 10, I decided to head back to the guest house for dinner. As I was nearing the pool, I got a text from the owner asking me where I was. I didn't think much of it because it was late, and he was probably wondering if I was safe. I didn't reply as we were almost there. When we sat down on the futon, the owner said I was just about to text you, and showed me the message he typed on his phone. I was just thinking about you read the message. I'm not sure what that meant. So I looked at his face trying to read him and realized he was doing the same. I tried to act normal and told him where we were. We all met a couple of other people we smoked. At around 11, the guys decided to head to their guest house. At that point, I got up and told him I was going to my own room. He looked at the time and asked me why I was ending the night so early. I told him I was tired from all the walking and that I wanted to be up early. He didn't push any further because there were other people around. I went back to the room filled with anticipation and dread, but thankfully, nothing happened that night. The next day I checked out, but my boss wasn't until 5 p.m. I didn't want to be left alone with the owner. So I met up with the guys leaving my luggage at the reception, which was also the eating area. When I came back, I picked up my bag, thanked him, and left. I still have no idea if it was the owner or the only helper that I'd seen around whoever it was trying to forcefully get through my door. Let's not meet. No one knew where it came from. We all went to sleep the night before, and it was there the next morning. Not even the owners of the house on both sides had a clue how it got there. Neither homeowner ever heard as much as the hiss of air brakes. During the whole of that night, the only real indication of how it arrived was the trailer was sitting upon. I was still relatively young at the time, around 13, but the subject was a hot topic around the neighborhood, and every person I spoke to, whether a kid or an adult, was eager to talk about it. Our neighborhood was somewhere new and off by itself, and it wasn't out of the ordinary for folks to dump things out there. Dogs and cats were the most common, but 1 or 2 cars would turn up every year. A house, though, no one ever seen that or expected it. The days passed, but no information could be gotten from anywhere. Soon, it began to take on a spooky and haunted reputation. Along with its phantom like a rival in the dark of the night, it did look a little familiar to that house from Psycho. The stories first reached me while I was talking to a friend's younger brother. Among the grade school kids, the house was becoming a very real symbol of fear, although it was just an old empty house to me. This fear didn't prevent some of the more adventurous of them just entering and exploring it. I witnessed a particularly funny episode just by chance. While loafing aimlessly around the streets, I was passing by in time to see a preteen boy running from the house in terror, claiming that something had grabbed him. Whether his imagination had gotten the best of him, or an older kid was having a bit of fun, the horror put upon this abandoned house had fully taken root in the neighborhood. While this was going on, a real boogeyman had been forgotten about. I'll not put his actual name here, not because of privacy, but that of the victims. We'll call him Rudy. Rudy had grown up in the neighborhood, and until he was arrested, was well liked by a lot of the parents, had voiced their fears early on because of his habit of hanging around younger boys. When he was released from jail, he was allowed to move in with his folks. Anyone who wasn't aware of his proclivities beforehand knew now every parent in the neighborhood watched him closely. But when the ghost house popped up, people's focus is shifted. A few of us teenagers were riding our bikes around the neighborhood. The father of a boy we'll call Bill was looking for a son. I overheard him speaking to a young kid close by, asking if he had seen him. Nonchalantly, the boy said that he had seen Bill going into that ghost house with Rudy just a few minutes prior. And this got my full attention. The shock of the father's face is still crystal clear in my mind. I turned around and watched the father run full speed into the house. Most of us there stood transfixed as we saw Bill's dad disappear inside. Things were quiet for about the first 30 seconds. Then, all of a sudden, a loud ruckus broke out, followed by Rudy flying out of the doorway and onto the ground below. Billy's dad was close behind. He leapt onto Rudy, throwing fists as he landed. Bill came out a few seconds later crying for his dad to stop. His dad ignored him, standing up and kicking Rudy to the ground over and over. Rudy eventually got to his feet and ran for home. Billy and his dad were right behind him. I continued to watch until they disappeared from my sight. Billy and Rudy would both claim later on that nothing had happened between them. Either way, Billy's dad had the support of most of the community, and Rudy declined to press charges on him. Rudy would eventually move away and out of the minds of most of us, until he was arrested 3 years later for abducting and killing 2 boys near his new home. Only then did we realize how lucky Bill had been. That night, as I'd fallen asleep, I remember wondering what was going to happen to Rudy and Bill's dad. When I woke up, things were normal for a summer morning. Around 9, I was making a bowl of cereal when I got a phone call. It was a friend of mine, and he was short of breath and excited. The ghost house. It's gone, man. I hung up and hopped on my bike. When I arrived at the end of the streets, I looked down and saw the empty lot as it used to be. I rode down to it, and a small group were gathering talking to the neighbors. It was much the same as the morning when it appeared. They hadn't heard or seen anything strange. It seemed to leave just as silently as it had arrived. To this day, I haven't met a soul who knows anything about that house. Sometimes I think I dreamt the whole thing up. But then I speak to an old friend from the neighborhood, and my memories are confirmed. Of course, I don't believe it was haunted or anything like that, but I know for sure that something was wrong about it. And I pray that I never see it again.